Hello, and welcome to the 15th chapter of our study on Greek and Roman mythology. Today we are going to be reading the story of Phaeton and the Chariot of the Sun. Both the Greeks and the Romans worshipped the god Apollo and assigned him to more duties perhaps than any other deity. Apollo was the god of music, archery, medicine, and protection of communities, as well as protection of shepherds' flocks. In addition, because Apollo was sometimes called the god of the sun by the Greeks, and the Romans always saw him as the sun god, he was often portrayed as a shining golden figure. That is why he frequently bore the name Phoebus, which means bright or brilliant. The sun's route across the sky each day was, to the ancients, the journey of Phoebus Apollo in his chariot. His sister Diana, who the Greeks called Artemis, was responsible for the journey of the moon. And without further ado, the story of Phaeton and the Chariot of the Sun. In the sunny plains of Greece there once dwelt a fair nymph named Clymene, who had been loved by the sun god Apollo, and who bore him a golden-haired boy named Phaeton. Early every morning, when the sun first appeared above the horizon, Clymene would point it out to her boy, and would tell him that his father, Apollo, was setting out in his golden chariot on his daily drive across the heavens. Clymene so often entertained her child with stories of his father's beauty and power that, as Phaeton grew, he became quite conceited about his parentage, and he acquired the habit of boasting loudly about how he was the son of great Apollo himself. Phaeton's schoolmates, after a time, grew weary of his bragging and his arrogance, and at last they challenged him to give them some proof that he was indeed Apollo's son, and they laughed at him when all he could do was to say, "My mother has told me that this is so." With their ridicule and mockery still ringing in his ears, Phaeton hastened to his mother and said, "If I am truly of heavenly birth, I beg you, mother, give me some proof of it, so I can establish my claim to honor." And Clymene answered him by saying, "I swear to you that you are Apollo's child, but if you must have more proof than this, then you must go to your father's house in the east, where he begins his journey each day, and ask him if you are truly his son." And this is what Phaeton chose to do. For many days and weeks he traveled to the east, first through his own country, then crossing Ethiopia and India, until he could go east no more, for he had come to the place where the sun rises in the morning. Here the palace of Apollo stood on a hill, its lofty columns glittering with gold and precious stones. The ceilings were made of polished ivory, and the doors of shining silver. Everything about the palace flashed and glowed and sparkled, and Phaeton had to turn his head and shield his eyes as he made his way toward the throne room. He stopped some distance from the throne itself, for the brilliance of the light that flashed from it was more than he could bear. Gradually his eyes began to see through the dazzling radiance, and he beheld a golden throne studded with diamonds and emeralds, and on that throne sat glorious Apollo, dressed in a purple robe and surrounded by his many attendants.
"What is the reason for you coming here, Phaeton?" Apollo asked the boy. "Do not fear to speak your mind, for you are my son, and I have a father's pride in seeing how like a man you have become."
And Phaeton replied, "O light of the universe, Apollo, my father, if you permit me to call you father, then give me some proof, I beg you, by which I may be known as your true son, and remove this doubt from my mind." Then Apollo took off his sparkling crown of light and asked the boy to come nearer. He embraced his son, saying,
"You are worthy to be called my son, and Clymene has told you the truth about your birth. And so that you may have no doubt at all, ask whatever favor you wish, and I will see that it is granted unto you."
He had scarcely spoken when the boy asked for his father's chariot and the right to drive his winged horses for one day. Then his father regretted his promise. Shaking his shining head 3 or 4 times, he said,
I have spoken in haste. This is the one request that I must deny, and I ask you to withdraw it. You, my son, are of mortal flesh, and what you seek to do cannot even be accomplished by the gods themselves. None but myself may drive the flaming car of day. Not even great Jupiter, with all his power and might, can undertake this treacherous journey." But seeing that Phaeton was resolute in his desire, Apollo described to him the task that he sought to undertake. "The first part of the path is steep, and the horses can make their way up it only with great difficulty, even though it is morning and they are fresh. In mid heaven the road is very high, and it often brings fear to me to look down on the sea and lands from there, and my heart trembles with terror. The last part of the road descends abruptly and requires most careful driving. The sea gods that wait to receive me often tremble in fear that I may fall headlong and crash into their waters." Still Phaeton was not moved to change his request, and Apollo, knowing that he could not go back on a promise once made, continued: "Do you dream, my son, that there are wonderful cities in the heavens, full of beautiful things? On the contrary, the road is through the midst of frightful monsters. You pass by the horns of the bull, in front of the archer, and near the lion's jaws, where the scorpion stretches its arms in one direction and the crab in another. Nor will you find it easy to guide these horses with their breath full of fire that they breathe forth from their mouths and nostrils. I can scarcely govern them myself when they are unruly and resist the reins. Beware, my son, lest I be the donor of a fatal gift. Recall your request while you still may. Look around the world and choose whatever you will from the treasures of earth or the sea, and I will grant it to you at once. But do not ask me to provide the means of your own destruction. If it is proof you want that you are sprung from my blood, what better proof is there than my fears for you? If you could look into my heart, there you would see a father's anxiety for his own child." Apollo finished his warnings, but his son rejected them all, and demanded that his father be true to his word and grant the request he had already made. There was no time for further entreaties, for Aurora, the goddess of the dawn, was now flinging open her purple gates, and her halls in the east were filling with a rosy glow. The stars were beginning to flee from the sky, and Apollo knew that he could delay no longer. He led Phaeton to the palace where the chariot was kept, and the boy was stunned by its brilliance, for it was made of solid gold, with many sparkling diamonds strewn about its surface. Then the attendants led in the 4 fire-breathing horses, and harnessed up their clinking bridles. Now Apollo spread a sacred ointment all about his son's face, which made him capable of enduring the brightness of the flame, and he set on his head his shining crown, sighing deeply as he said, "Obey at least these 3 warnings, my son. Spare the whip, and keep tight hold on the reins. Keep away from both the deep southern and far northern parts of the heavens, and stay in the middle zone. And so that the sky and the earth may receive equal heat, do not go too high, lest you burn up the roof of heaven, nor too low, or you will set the earth afire. The middle course is safest and best, and you will see the clear tracks of my wheels to guide you. The rest I entrust to the goddess Fortuna, and I pray that she may take better care of you than you take care of yourself." The agile youth sprang into the chariot, stood erect, and grasped the reins with delight, pouring out thanks to his reluctant parent. Then the great steed sprang forth and rose upward through the clouds, outrunning the morning breezes. They could feel that their load was unusually light this morning, for young Phaeton weighed much less than his mighty father, and the horses tossed the cart about as though it were empty. They began to rush headlong, and soon the chariot had left the well-trodden path. Phaeton was now terrified with panic, for he did not know how to manage the reins that had been entrusted to him, nor did he know the right course to follow. The boy looked down upon the lands that were spread out far, far below him, and he grew pale, and his knees shook with sudden fear. Oh, how he wished he had never set foot in his father's chariot, and how he regretted learning of his birth and being granted what he begged for.
He was powerless to do anything but hold on for his life, and he was being carried along just like a sailing ship that is driven before a gale. But what was he to do? Much of the sky was left behind him, but more still lay ahead. He turned his eyes in terror from one direction to the next as all about him rose up the monstrous forms that were scattered over the surface of the heavens. The scorpion reached out as Phaeton with his two great claws, and the reins fell from the frightened boy's hands. The horses, now feeling the reins loose on their back, dashed unrestrained into unknown regions of the sky, in among the stars, hurling the chariot over pathless places, now up in high heavens, now down almost to the surface of the earth. The clouds began to smoke, and the mountain tops were engulfed in flames from the fireball that passed so near above them. The fields all over the earth were parched with the heat, and the plants withered, and all the harvests were ablaze. Great cities perished, their once mighty walls and happy people now left in ashes. Phaeton looked down and saw that the whole world was on fire, and all because he had not heeded his father's warnings. Now the rivers began to shrink from their banks, and large seas shriveled so that where water was before, now there was only a dry plain. The fishes sought out the lowest depths of the oceans, and dolphins no longer frolicked above the waves. Mighty Neptune himself 3 times tried to raise the water above the surface to see what was wearing away his waters, and 3 times he was driven back by the heat. Then it was that great Jupiter looked down from Olympus and saw that, unless he acted at once, all the world would be consumed in utter destruction. But now there were no clouds for him to spread over the wide earth as he had done before when the crops needed to be screened from the sun. Nor were there any cooling rains for him to send down. And so he took up a great lightning bolt in his hand, and he aimed it at the boy in the chariot. Now he hurled the bolt with all his might, and his aim was true, for it struck Phaeton with full force and sent him tumbling from the cart. The boy's long hair was set ablaze, and it burned brightly as he fell headlong toward the earth, like a shooting star that streaks the heavens with its brightness. The horses and the riderless carriage now sped upward toward the west and soon disappeared from view, and the earth was cooled in the balm of darkness. But Phaeton's life was ended by the lightning bolt and his fall to earth. His scorched body was laid to rest in a far-off land. An inscription was carved on his tomb: "Driver of Apollo's chariot, Phaeton, struck by Jove's thunder, rests beneath this stone. He could not rule his father's car of fire, yet was it much so nobly to aspire." Hope you have enjoyed that reading of Phaeton and the Chariot of the Sun. A few more words. Apollo warned his son about the monstrous animals that lay along the road through the heavens. The scorpion, the bull, the lion, and the rest were all major constellations in the sky, and parts of the ancient circular calendar we now know as the zodiac. The basis for this word is the Greek word zoon, which means animals. This has found its name into the first great public collection of wild animals, the Zoological Gardens in London. People quickly began shortening the name of this park to the Zoological, and finally just to the Zoo. In this tale, we also see Apollo trusting his son's fate to the goddess Fortuna, the Roman goddess of chance, even though raw chance or fate could produce disastrous outcomes as well as fortunate ones. The modern word fortune can simply mean one's destiny or that which happens by chance, implying neither a good nor a bad outcome, like is in a fortune teller or a fortune cookie. However, the word fortune can also imply a prosperous or favorable condition, as in, I made a fortune selling lemonade, or the young prince inherited the king's fortune. The word fortunate also means lucky or having a good outcome, and we owe it all to the goddess Fortuna. Hope you enjoyed this reading. Join us next time.